Spring's first breath had thawed the lake, its surface no longer a treacherous mirror, but a rippling expanse reflecting a tentative blue sky, the air scented with wet earth and budding pines. Kayla and Echo stepped out together, their strides sinking in a quiet rhythm along the shore, her boots crunching softly on gravel, his paws padding with a steadiness that belied his healing scars. His amber eyes flicked to her, alert yet calm, the frostbitten tips of his ears catching the light like badges of survival, while her hand hung loose at her side, no longer clenched in fear. A sudden tilt of his head answered her soft call of Echo, the name a melody that sealed their trust, his response a subtle wag that stirred the air like a promise kept. The elevator doors groaned open on the 12th floor, spilling Darren into a corridor bathed in the sickly glow of flickering fluorescent lights. Shadows clung to the walls like old regrets, the air thick with the musty scent of neglect. Damp carpet underfoot, faint traces of bleach masking something metallic and raw. Apartment doors lined the hall, each a silent witness, but 12B stood apart. Fresh scratches marred its peeling paint-jagged lines like desperate pleas carved by claws. The whimper grew sharper now, a rhythmic scratching underscoring it, emanating from behind the door like a heartbeat trapped in a cage. Rain hammered the building's exterior, seeping through cracks in the windowsill, pooling on the floor in dark stains that mirrored blood. Darren's pulse echoed the sound, the hallway narrowing in his mind to a tunnel of isolation, where every creak hinted at a presence wounded, watchful, and on the brink of breaking free. Darren's hand trembled on the doorknob, the cold metal seeping into his palm like the chill of old failures. Inside his mind, the whimper twisted into echoes of his past. A marriage dissolved in the acid of his relentless pursuits, a journalism career abandoned after one too many dead ends that left him chasing ghosts in headlines. He wasn't a hero. He was a spectator numb to the world's cruelties, his days dissolving into the lobby's fluorescent haze. Why this door? Why now? The sound burrowed deeper, a mirror to his own silenced cries, the ones he buried under layers of indifference. His breath came shallow, chest tight, as if the building's weight pressed down, paralyzing him in a fog of regret. Fear not of what waited inside, but of caring enough to open the door and risk shattering his fragile shell. He leaned his forehead against the wood, eyes closed, the scratching now, a desperate Morse code spelling out isolation. One turn of the key and everything could unravel, or nothing, and he'd remain forever adrift in this high-rise tomb. The key clicked into the lock, a sound sharp as a fracture in ice. Darren paused, the whimper halting mid-breath, replaced by a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the door like a warning from the abyss. In the sliver of shadow beneath the frame, he glimpsed movement, a subtle shift, eyes perhaps gleaming faintly in the dark like embers in ash. "Easy there," he murmured, his voice a threadbare whisper, not just to whatever lurked inside but to the stirring hope in his own chest, a promise that this intrusion might pull him from his stasis, binding him to a fate woven in pain and redemption. Darren hadn't always been a shadow in a uniform manning the door of a crumbling high-rise like a forgotten sentinel. Years ago, he was a journalist with fire in his veins, chasing stories through the underbelly of the city, corruption in boardrooms, whispers of scandals that could topple empires. His marriage to Elena had been the anchor, her laughter a beacon in the chaos, until his obsession with a trafficking exposé consumed him. Nights blurred into dawn, spent poring over leads, ignoring her pleas for balance until the day she packed her bags, her eyes wet with the weight of his absences. "You're saving the world, Darren, but who's saving us?" she'd whispered, the door clicking shut like a final verdict. The story broke, but so did he. The ring exposed was too vast, the backlash swift, threats in the mail, a demotion disguised as a break, leaving him adrift. He retreated to the doorman's post, a job that asked nothing of his soul, where the city's pulse throbbed outside while he withered within. Regret clung to him like cigarette smoke in his clothes flashbacks, ambushing him in quiet moments. Elena's hand slipping from his, the headlines that cost him everything. Now the whimper from 12B tugged at those frayed threads, a reminder that some losses echoed louder in silence, pulling him toward a redemption he wasn't sure he deserved. Darren's days melted into a gray haze, each one a carbon copy stamped with indifference. He arrived at dawn, the lobby's marble floor cold under his shoes, nodding mechanically at tenants who barely registered his existence, briefcases swinging eyes glued to phones. His routine was a fortress check. The logbook buzz in deliveries, stare at the security monitors where grainy figures moved like specters in a dream. Lunch was a sandwich from the corner deli eaten alone in the back room amid stacks of yellowed newspapers, their headlines a mocking chorus of unsolved mysteries. Evenings stretched longer, the high-rise emptying like a vein drained of blood, leaving him with the hum of the elevator and the occasional drip from a leaky faucet. He avoided mirrors, fearing the emptiness in his gaze, the way his hands trembled slightly when idle. Whiskey waited in his cramped apartment upstairs, a numbing elixir that blurred the edges of regret without erasing them. The Whimpers had started as just another anomaly dismissed like the flickering lights or the erratic heat, but now they gnawed at his defenses, cracking the ice around his heart. Why care, he thought, pouring another glass, the liquid burning like unspoken truths. Yet in the quiet hours the sound lingered, a fragile thread threatening to pull him back into the fray. Echo hadn't always been a ghost haunting the shadows of apartment 12B. Once he was a beacon of loyalty in a world unraveling at the seams. Bred from strong lines, his coat a sleek black and tan armor. He came into Mrs. Halley's life as a puppy, his paws oversized promises of protection. She named him Echo for the way his barks bounced off the high-rise walls, a joyful resonance in her solitary days. But Mrs. Halley carried secrets like weights in her pockets, ties to a shadowy network she stumbled into through desperation, a single mother fleeing debts that led her to the building owner's illicit dealings. Echo witnessed it all, the late-night visitors with cold eyes, the hushed arguments that escalated into shoves, the scent of fear mingling with her tears. One fateful night, chaos erupted. Mr. Voss's men bursting and demanding silence about the trafficking ring that funneled vulnerable souls through the building's underbelly. Mrs. Halley fought, clutching a child's stuffed bear smeared with blood from a struggle involving a kidnapped young one she'd tried to shield. Echo lunged, teeth bared in primal fury, but a boot to his ribs sent him crumpling. A yelp swallowed in the fray. She fled into the night, forced to abandon him, her whispered, "Stay, boy," a betrayal that shattered his world. Left chained in the trashed apartment, days blurred into starvation, his body wasting under scars from kicks and neglect, ribs protruding like accusations, eyes dulled to wary slits. He guarded the blood-stained toy obsessively, its faded fur a talisman of lost innocence, his whimpers a lament for the human who vanished, leaving him to survive on instincts honed by pain. Flinching at every shadow, growling at phantom threats, Echo became a vessel of trauma. His loyalty twisted into mistrust, mirroring the hidden horrors that festered in the high-rise's veins. In the dim glow of Darren's flashlight, Echo's eyes met his two voids, reflecting the same hollow ache, as if the dog saw through the man's facade to the fractures beneath. Darren knelt in the apartment's wreckage, his hand extended, but not insistent, sensing in Echo's tense frame the echo of his own guarded heart. Both had been betrayed by those they trusted, left to navigate a world that offered no mercy. Echo's scars, raw and puckered under matted fur, paralleled Darren's invisible wounds, the divorce that stripped him bare, the career that crumbled like sandcastles against the tide of corruption. Neither sought pity. Their emptiness was a shared language spoken in averted gazes and shallow breaths, a mutual recognition that survival meant walls built high. As Darren whispered reassurances into the stale air, Echo's ears twitched, not in fear, but in faint acknowledgement, their parallel paths converging in this forsaken space. Darren's numbness from lost purpose, Echo's from abandoned loyalty, forging an unspoken bridge where healing might begin one wary step at a time in the quiet symphony of their mirrored solitude. The door creaked open like a reluctant confession, spilling Darren into the abyss of apartment 12B. Moonlight filtered through tattered curtains, casting jagged shadows over the chaos, overturned chairs, splintered like broken promises, shattered glass crunching underfoot like fragile memories, and papers strewn like discarded lives. The air hung heavy with the metallic tang of blood and the musky odor of fear-soaked fur. There in the far corner crouched the German shepherd Echo, his black and tan coat matted and dull hackles raised like thorns defending a withered rose. His eyes, wild amber pools rimmed with exhaustion, locked onto Darren with a ferocity born of survival, lips curling back to reveal teeth glinting in the dim light. Clutched between his paws was a blood-stained toy, a child's stuffed bear, its fabric torn and darkened, guarded as if it were the last tether to a vanished world. Echo's growl rumbled low, vibrating through the floorboards, a warning laced with desperation, while outside the rain intensified, drumming against the windows like an urgent heartbeat. Darren froze his breath, catching the scene, a visceral punch to his gut. The dog's raw vulnerability, mirroring his own hidden fractures, pulling him deeper into the storm of empathy he thought he'd outrun. Darren's hand hovered mid-air, the flashlight beam trembling like his resolve, illuminating Echo's scarred muzzle and the toy's crimson stains. Why me? His mind raced, a torrent of doubt crashing against the walls of his numbness. Calling animal control would be easy, a quick handoff to strangers, preserving the fragile bubble of his isolation. Caring meant risk, another failure like Elena's departure, or the expose that cost him his fire, leaving him hollow. Echo's growl softened to a whimper, eyes flickering with a plea that pierced Darren's defenses, stirring the embers of compassion he'd buried deep. Logic screamed retreat. This wasn't his mess, not his dog, not his mystery, but empathy whispered otherwise, the dog's trembling form a reflection of his own unspoken pleas for rescue. He backed a step, heart pounding, torn between the safety of indifference and the perilous pull of connection. Darren's hesitation shattered like the glass underfoot as Echo's whimper pierced the air again, a raw plea that bypassed his defenses. He rummaged in his pocket, pulling out a crumpled granola bar meant for his own midnight snack, and tore it open, the wrapper crinkling like thunder in the tense silence. Kneeling slowly, he extended the bar palm up, his voice, a murmur of coaxing whispers. "Hey, buddy, it's okay. No one's hurting you tonight." Echo's growl faltered, nostrils flaring at the scent of oats and honey, his body rigid but inching forward in halting steps, paws scraping the debris-strewn floor. The dog's tongue darted out tentatively, snatching a crumb, eyes never leaving Darren's face, a messy communion born of necessity. Darren's heart hammered the act, feeling reckless, irreversible. He glanced at the door, knowing animal control would seal Echo's fate in a cage or worse. Instead, he uncoiled a makeshift leash from his belt, looping it gently around Echo's neck without force, the dog tensing, but not resisting. Together, they stumbled out into the hall, Darren's arm supporting Echo's limping gait, the blood-stained toy clutched in the dog's jaws like a sacred relic. The elevator descent was a blur of shadows and labored breaths, committing Darren to this path. A flawed savior stepping into the unknown, the weight of decision settling like a storm cloud over his soul. In the dim basement boiler room, Darren fashioned a nook from old blankets and crates, the air thick with the hum of machinery and the faint drip of condensation like unshed tears. He set down a bowl of water scavenged from the utility sink, its surface rippling under the bare bulb's glare, and placed the granola remnants nearby, stepping back to give Echo space. The dog circled warily, dropping the blood-stained toy at his feet, before lapping at the water with cautious tongue flicks, his eyes flicking to Darren, guarded yet softening at the edges. Darren sat on an overturned bucket, his internal whirlwind calming as he watched, murmuring, "We'll figure this out, you and me. No more hiding." Echo finished lying down with a sigh that echoed Darren's own exhaustion, the toy nestled under his chin like a shield against the world's cruelties. In that moment, a silent vow formed. Darren would probe the mystery of Mrs. Hallie and the toy, not for glory, but for this broken creature who mirrored his fractures. The bond was fragile, woven from shared shadows and tentative gestures, but it pulsed with the promise of healing, a quiet anchor in the high-rise's storm, where trust began not with grand declarations, but with the simple act of staying. The basement boiler room became a shadowed sanctuary, its walls humming with the low thrum of pipes like a heartbeat buried deep in earth. Darren descended the creaky stairs each evening after his shift, the air thick with the scent of rust and damp concrete, carrying a bowl of kibble scavenged from a corner store and a fresh blanket to ward off the chill. Echo had claimed the farthest corner a nest of crates and rags where he curled tightly, his body a coiled spring of black and tan fur, eyes gleaming like distant stars in the dim bulb's glow. He watched Darren's every move with unblinking intensity, a low growl rumbling in his throat whenever the man ventured too close, a warning etched in the scars that crisscrossed his flanks, reminders of hands that struck without mercy. Darren respected the invisible barrier, setting the food down midway across the room. His own movements deliberate and slow, like approaching a storm cloud on the horizon. He sat on the cold floor opposite, back against the wall, knees drawn up, his mind a whirlpool of unspoken thoughts. Why push? He'd learned the hard way that forcing closeness only bred more distance, memories of Elena's retreating figure flashing like lightning in his skull. Echo's silence mirrored his own, a fortress built from betrayal, where words were weapons unused. Nights passed in this standoff, the only sounds the drip of a leaky faucet and Echo's occasional shift, his paws twitching in dreams of pursuit or pain. One humid evening, the basement air clung like a second skin, heavy with the metallic tang of impending rain filtering through the high vents. Darren noticed it immediately upon entering Echo's right forepaw, held gingerly off the ground, a fresh gash weeping crimson onto the concrete, likely from a shard of glass hidden in the debris. The dog's eyes met his, not with aggression, but a muted plea, his body still huddled in the corner, the blood-stained toy pressed close like a talisman against further hurt. Darren's chest tightened, a mirror to his own unhealed scars, the emotional lacerations from lost love and shattered dreams that festered in silence. He moved slowly, retrieving a first aid kit from his locker upstairs, its contents rattling like bones in a grave. Kneeling at a respectful distance, he soaked a cloth in antiseptic, the sharp scent cutting through the mustiness, and extended it toward Echo. "This might sting, but it'll help," he thought, his internal voice a gentle coax echoing the care he'd once denied himself. Echo tensed, a whimper escaping like a sigh from cracked earth. But he didn't retreat. Instead, he watched, ears perked, as Darren demonstrated on his own hand, the cool liquid a brief shock. The dog shifted slightly, exposing the wound, a deep slice, raw and inflamed, symbolizing the unspoken traumas they both carried. Darren inched closer, the cloth hovering, and when Echo didn't snap, he dabbed gently, the touch feather light absorbing the flinch that rippled through the dog's frame like a shared shiver. The basement's boiler hissed like a serpent in slumber, its rhythmic pulse underscoring the fragile peace between man and dog. Darren reached into his pocket, pulling out a weathered tennis ball scavenged from the lobby's lost and found, its felt worn thin like the pages of an old diary. He rolled it gently across the concrete, not toward Echo, but parallel, a non-threatening arc that bounced softly against the wall. Echo's ears perked, his head tilting in a flicker of curiosity, but then a sudden creak from the pipes above triggered a sharp bark from deep in his throat, raw, echoing off the walls like a gunshot in a canyon. The sound froze Darren, his mind reeling back in a cascade of flashbacks, the newsroom clamor fading to Elena's voice, sharp with frustration. "Your barks at shadows are tearing us apart." Her words a prelude to the door slamming shut, leaving him in silence thicker than fog. Shadows danced on the basement walls like hesitant partners at a forgotten ball, the boiler's glow casting a warmer hue than the nights before. Darren sat cross-legged on the gritty floor, the tennis ball now a talisman between them, its bounce a tentative invitation to something lighter than the weight they both carried. Echo watched from his corner, the bandaged paw resting easier, his body language shifting from rigid guard to subtle intrigue, tail no longer tucked, but still like a flag at half-mast awaiting wind. Darren tossed the ball lightly, not directly at Echo, but into the open space where it rolled with a soft thud, echoing the rhythm of rain pattering above. The dog's eyes tracked at a spark igniting in their depths, and for the first time he lunged playfully, paws skittering on the concrete as he batted it back with his nose. A chuckle bubbled up from Darren's chest, unexpected and rusty like a door long sealed, creaking open, the sound foreign in his own ears, a warmth spreading through him like sunlight piercing storm clouds. Echo paused, head cocked as if assessing this new noise, then wagged his tail once, a hesitant flicker that mirrored Darren's emerging smile. The game evolved in fits and starts. Darren rolling Echo chasing with growing enthusiasm, his barks now playful yips that filled the space with life, banishing the ghosts of Whimper's past. Darren's mind wandered in the joy. This is what I've missed, simple sparks in the dark, like Elena's laughter before the shadows swallowed us. He pulled a treat from his pocket, a piece of jerky, holding it out on his palm, flat and inviting. Echo approached slowly, nostrils quivering at the savory scent of smoked meat mingling with the basement's must, his eyes meeting Darren's in a moment of unguarded trust. No growl, no flinch. Instead, Echo's tongue grazed Darren's skin, gently accepting the food from his hand, the contact electric a bridge of flesh and fur sealing their pact. The basement had transformed over the weeks into a fragile haven, its once oppressive shadows now softened by the routine of shared evenings, the boiler's hum a steady lullaby against the high-rise's distant clamor. Darren descended the stairs that night with a heavier step, his mind tangled in the web of his budding investigation. Scraps of notes on Mrs. Hallie scribbled on napkins, the blood-stained toy hidden in a locker upstairs, its secrets whispering of deeper darkness. He carried a bowl of stew pilfered from his own dinner, chunks of meat and carrots steaming in the chill air, the savory aroma cutting through the musty damp like a memory of home-cooked warmth he hadn't known since Elena. Echo lay in his corner, the bandaged paw healing into a faint scar, his body no longer a tight coil, but relaxed fur rising and falling with even breaths. Darren set the bowl down midway as always and sank onto the floor back against the wall, his internal monologue a quiet storm. Why does this feel like more than pity? He's pulling me out of the numb one glance at a time like threads unraveling a cocoon I built myself. The tennis ball rested nearby, scuffed from their games, a symbol of the sparks that had ignited laughter in this underground tomb. Echo's eyes opened amber depths reflecting the bulb's glow, watching Darren with an intensity that bordered on understanding. No growl, no flinch, just a steady gaze that pierced the man's defenses. Minutes stretched like taffy in the humid air, the drip of condensation marking time until Echo shifted. It was subtle at first, a paw extending, then his body uncurling, muscles rippling under fur as he rose on all fours, the toy left behind for the first time unguarded. Darren's breath hitched, heart pounding like a drum in a cavern, his thoughts racing. Is this it? The surrender I've been waiting for or fearing? Echo padded forward each step, deliberate nails clicking softly on the concrete like hesitant raindrops on a window pane. The distance closed 5 feet 3-1, until Echo stood before him close enough for Darren to smell the earthy scent of his coat mingled with the stew's steam. The dog's head lowered, nudging Darren's knee with his muzzle, a gentle pressure that sent a jolt through the man, electric and profound. Darren's hand lifted instinctively, hovering, waiting for permission, his eyes stinging with unshed tears as memories flooded Elena's touch, fading the exposés that isolated him, the loneliness that had become his shadow. The basement's newfound warmth began to fracture one overcast evening, the air thickening with an unspoken tension that prickled Darren's skin like static before a storm. Echo, who had taken to greeting Darren with a nudge and wag, now paced restlessly near the door. His ears pivoted toward the ceiling, as if tuning into a frequency only he could hear. Footsteps echoed faintly from the floors above, ordinary tenants shuffling home, but Echo froze, hackles rising like needles on a pine, a low growl rumbling from his chest like thunder trapped in a bottle. Darren paused mid-step, bowl of food in hand, his internal thoughts swirling. What's got you spooked, boy? It's just the building settling, or is it something more? The dog's posture shifted to alert rigidity, body low and still as a statue carved from shadow amber eyes, darting to unseen threats, his breath coming in sharp huffs that cut through the boiler's hum. Subtle echoes of past trauma resurfaced, a flinch at a distant door slam, mirroring the nights of abuse under Mrs. Hallie's roof, the sense of fear and violence ingrained like stains on his soul. Darren approached slowly, hand extended, but Echo's growl deepened, not at him, but at the invisible specter above, foreshadowing a resurgence of danger that the high-rise's walls could no longer contain. The peace shattered further as Echo barked sharply at a shadow flickering from the vent, his instincts a primal alarm bell ringing in the dim light. The basement's air grew thick with foreboding, the boiler's hum now a mocking undertone to the rising storm within. Darren knelt beside Echo, hand outstretched to soothe, but the dog's growl escalated into a protective snarl, teeth bared like ivory daggers glinting in the dim light. A tenant's voice filtered through the vents. Mrs. Ramirez from 8C gossiping in the lobby about that poor Mrs. Halley vanished without a trace. Police called it a runaway, but who knows? And Echo erupted, lunging toward the sound with hackles like a ridge of thorns, his body a taut bowstring of aggression rooted in buried trauma. Darren's heart slammed against his ribs, flashbacks crashing like waves. Echo's memories of that fateful night, Voss's men bursting in fists and boots raining down as Mrs. Halley screamed, her maternal instinct flaring to protect not just herself, but the hidden child she'd sheltered from the trafficking shadows. The dog's eyes wild, reflecting the violence. Blood on the floor, the toy clutched as a last remnant of innocence lost. Panic flooded Darren, his own shouts escaping in a raw explosion. "Easy, boy, it's nothing!" But his voice cracked, hands shaking as he grabbed Echo's collar, pulling him back, the contact electric with shared fear. Echo whirled, not biting but pressing against Darren in a frenzy, protective instincts, misfiring his whimpers, mingling with barks that echoed maternal desperation. Darren's mind reeled, piecing fragments, the toy's blood, not Echo's, but perhaps the child's DNA, whispers of horrors dismissed by corrupt badges. Anger surged through him, a volcanic eruption at the cover-up, his fists clenching as he envisioned Voss's smug face, the building owner weaving webs of human misery. Withdrawal threatened Darren's instinct to shut down like after Elena left, but Echo's presence anchored him, their emotions intertwined in a chaotic dance. The dog paced tail low, glancing at Darren with eyes pleading for understanding, revealing glimpses of abuse-chained night's starvation, the betrayal that forged his steel. Darren slumped against the wall, breath ragged, whispering apologies into the fur. The basement a pressure cooker of resurfaced pain, where panic wove threads of revelation, binding them tighter in the face of encroaching shadows. The basement door creaked open like a fracture in reality, spilling harsh lobby light into the dim sanctuary and silhouetting a figure that made Darren's blood run cold. Mr. Voss, the building owner, descended the stairs with deliberate steps, his polished shoes clicking like judgments on the concrete face, a mask of feigned concern twisted into something predatory, eyes narrow slits scanning the shadows. "Darren, my boy, heard some disturbances down here. Tenants complaining about barking. Wouldn't want any issues, would we?" His voice oozed like oil slick and suffocating the air, thickening with the scent of his expensive cologne masking underlying rot. Echo's reaction was instantaneous, primal, a guttural snarl ripping from his throat, body launching forward with hackles erect, recognizing the man from that nightmarish blur, Voss's boot connecting with his ribs, the command to shut that mutt up as Mrs. Halley was dragged away. Darren rose, positioning himself between them, heart thundering like a trapped animal, his internal storm raging. This is him, the spider at the web's center, trafficking lives through these walls. Voss's gaze landed on Echo, a flicker of recognition igniting malice. That dog, Halley's, isn't it? The basement door's echo faded like a dying scream, leaving Darren and Echo in a vacuum of heavy silence, the air still charged with Voss's lingering cologne, a cloying veil over the rot beneath. Darren slumped against the boiler, its warmth a mocking contrast to the ice in his veins, his breaths ragged as flashbacks swirled Elena's final glance, the exposés that burned bridges, now this monster in human skin threatening to engulf him. Echo fur, bristling like a storm-tossed field, circled once before pressing his solid frame against Darren's side, a warm anchor in the tumult, his head resting on the man's thigh with a sigh that spoke volumes unspoken. No barks now, just the subtle tremor in Echo's flanks, mirroring Darren's shaking hands, their shared fear weaving into a tapestry of resolve. Darren's fingers buried in the dog's coat, stroking rhythmically the coarse fur, grounding him as he whispered into the dimness, "We're in this together, boy. He won't touch us." The promise hung like incense, sealing a pact born from the ashes of confrontation. Echo's protective lunge, a echo of loyalty, reclaimed Darren's defiance, a spark against the dark. The high-rise lobby pulsed with an undercurrent of unease, its marble floors reflecting the comings and goings like a distorted mirror of normalcy. But Darren sensed the shift, a prickling at his nape like invisible eyes boring into his back. Strange men loitered near the elevators, their suits ill-fitting disguises over bulky frames, glances darting like shadows, fleeing light, lingering too long on him as he nodded at passing tenants. Echo, now a constant shadow at his side during off-hours walks, stiffened beside him in the basement, hackles rising in a silent ridge, ears swiveling toward unseen noises. Footsteps that paused too deliberately above whispers carried on vents like poisoned air. Darren's internal monologue churned. They're watching Voss's hounds, closing in every creak a warning. He swept the basement with a flashlight beam slicing through dust motes like a scalpel, revealing anomalies, a small black device tucked behind a pipe lens, glinting coldly, a hidden camera, its red light pulsing like a predator's eye. More followed, nestled in corners, wires snaking into walls, transforming their sanctuary into a panopticon of surveillance. Echo growled, low nose-twitching at the faint electronic hum, his instincts a primal radar detecting the encroachment before Darren's logic caught up body language, taut tail straight as an arrow paws, planted wide in watchful stance. The basement door burst open like a dam, giving way, flooding the dim space with harsh flashlight beams that sliced through the shadows like accusatory fingers. Two of Voss's men stormed in burly silhouettes, with faces hardened by secrets, one brandishing a crowbar that glinted ominously under the bulb's flicker, the other cracking knuckles like breaking bones. "Where's the toy doorman? Boss says it's time to clean house," the larger one snarled, voice gravelly, as the concrete underfoot advancing with predatory steps that echoed Darren's thundering heartbeat. Echo exploded from his side, a black and tan blur of fury, snarling with teeth bared like jagged lightning launching at the intruders in a primal bid to protect. Darren's world narrowed to chaos, the metallic tang of fear sweat mingling with the boiler's heat, the crunch of boots on debris, his internal scream. Not now, not him, as Echo clamped onto the crowbar wielder's leg, eliciting a howl of pain, and a vicious kick that sent the dog skidding across the floor, yelping in agony. Time fractured in this basement's inferno, the crowbar hovering like a scythe poised to reap Voss's men looming as harbingers of Darren's unraveling. Echo, bloodied and trembling, hauled himself up with a guttural growl, positioning between Darren and the assailants, his body a living shield, despite the pain etching lines in his fur-amber eyes, fierce a mirror to Darren's surging resolve. The man's mind raced in a torrent. This is it, the choice that defines or destroys, like the exposés I chased, the love I lost. Can't let them take him. Take us. Adrenaline surged like liquid fire through his veins, transforming fear into action. He lunged forward, grabbing a loose pipe from the floor, cold metal heavy in his grip, a makeshift weapon born of desperation. Swinging wildly, he connected with the crowbar wielder's arm, a crack echoing like thunder in the confined space, the man staggering back with a curse. "Run, boy," Darren shouted, but Echo held ground, snapping at the second attacker's ankles, buying precious seconds in a ballet of chaos. Darren's free hand fumbled for his phone thumb flying over the screen to send a pre-drafted message to his old journalism colleague, photos of the toy-scanned DNA reports from a discreet lab contact, Voss's incriminating ledgers he'd pilfered earlier, all bursting into the ether like a flare in the night evidence that could topple the trafficking empire. The decision crystallized. Protect Echo, expose the rot, even if it costs everything. Sirens wailed into silence outside the high-rise, their echoes fading like distant memories as Darren and Echo huddled in the borrowed safe house, a modest apartment on the city's edge, its walls painted in soft beige curtains drawn against the dawn's tentative light. Darren moved with deliberate slowness, his shoulder throbbing from the bruise Voss's men had left a dull ache that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. He eased onto the couch, the fabric yielding softly beneath him, cradling his exhaustion like an old friend. Echo limped to his side, favoring the bandaged flank where the kick had landed, his breath shallow and measured fur matted with dried blood that Darren gently wiped away with a damp cloth. Each stroke a whisper of care in the quiet room. The air hung heavy with the scent of antiseptic and herbal tea steeping on the counter. steam curling lazily upward, mingling with the faint metallic tang of their shared ordeal. News flickered on the muted TV grainy footage of arrests at the building, Voss in handcuffs, his empire crumbling, signaling survival, a fragile return to safety that wrapped around them like a blanket warmed by the sun. Darren's hand rested on Echo's head fingers, tracing the contours of his ears, the dog's eyes half closing in response, a soft whine escaping like a sigh released after holding breath too long. Minimal words passed just the rustle of fabric as Echo shifted closer, his weight a grounding presence against Darren's leg. Time stretched in long, languid pauses, the clock's tick, a gentle reminder that they had endured the crisis's storm, ebbing into this serene harbor, where healing began not with fanfare but with the simple act of being still together. Weeks unfolded in the safe house like pages turning in a well-worn book each day, a steady rhythm of small, interwoven acts that knit Darren and Echo's wounds, physical and unseen, into scars of quiet strength. Darren rose with the sun's first rays filtering through the curtains, his movements fluid, now the bruise on his shoulder fading to a faint shadow. He'd prepare breakfast, the sizzle of eggs in the pan, filling the air with savory warmth, placing Echo's bowl on the floor with a soft clink, watching as the dog approached without hesitation, tail sweeping in broad, lazy arcs that stirred the dust motes dancing in the light. Morning light spilled over the city park, painting the grass in hues of gold, the air crisp with the scent of dew and blooming jasmine, a quiet contrast to the high-rises' stale shadows. Darren and Echo stepped out together, their strides sinking effortlessly, Darren's boots scuffing softly on the path. Echo's paws padding with newfound ease, his tail wagging freely like a metronome of joy, unburdened by the scars that had once tethered him to fear. The leash hung loose between them, more a formality than restraint, their bond a tether stronger than nylon. Darren's hand rested lightly on the lead fingers, brushing the worn leather, his internal thoughts a gentle hum. We're free, boy, not just from Voss, but from the cages we built inside. Echo paused to sniff a dandelion nose twitching, then glanced up, amber eyes catching the sun meeting Darren's with a spark of recognition that needed no words. Echo. Darren called softly, the name a caress on his tongue, and the dog responded instantly, trotting to his side head, nudging Darren's palm in a gesture so intimate it stole his breath, a single, unexpected act that crystallized their journey from despair to trust. The motion was quiet, but seismic, hands and fur converging in a dance of release. Echo's breath warm against Darren's skin, the park's sounds birdsong, distant laughter fading into a cocoon of their shared rebirth. Yet a faint shadow lingered, the memory of blood on the toy Hallie's unresolved flight, whispering that peace was hard-won and fragile. As they walked side by side, Darren's heart lifted, the weight of past failures, Elena the exposés easing like a tide receding, replaced by this unspoken vow etched in every step together. They were whole, their trust a beacon against any lingering dark.